Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then, the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Brittany Lawrence. You know, it's interesting to be putting together a Weird News Podcast during one of the absolute weirdest times in history. You can't make up murder hornets. I mean, you could, but at this point you don't need to. The world is strange enough and nothing makes sense as it is. Are people even still weird? Or are they just angry? Trust that humanity and even nature itself won't ever let us down in that department. Weird is alive and well. Even though the world can be strange all on its own, Rona season has definitely done its due diligence in creating its own exceptional madness. Mix quarantine with social media, and we have all done things that we may not want to revisit a few years from now. One man in particular found that his path to quarantine fame landed him in some deep water. While others have become way too comfortable in their new work-from-home environment, and one profession in particular, one you might not expect, has their superiors asking them to please get dressed before coming to work. And while some Disney princesses may be out of the castle for the time being, some costume characters are finding new and unusual ways to pass the time. Even the villains seem to be turning over a new leaf, in hopes we can all get past the pandemic and back to fighting the good guys instead of a virus. But it's not just getting to humanity. A large gang of monkeys in India may have their own idea on how to manage corona. They just don't want to let any of us in on it. Stick around, and later on in the show, I'm going to count down the top 10 sound illusions. Some of these will really mess with your senses. Now, for many of us, there's a little voice inside our head that says, you know what? That doesn't actually sound like a good idea. For one Louisiana man, he either fired that particular voice or chose not to listen. Police recently found the man caught on video swimming through a fish tank at the local Bass Pro Shop. 26-year-old Kevin Wise. The joke connecting his name and the absurdity of his life choices is really too easy, so I'll leave it alone. He told local news that he plunged into the indoor aquarium at a Bass Pro Shop in Bossier City last week to follow through on a promise he made to followers on TikTok. I said that if I got to 2,000 likes, I would jump in the tank. I got way more than that, and I didn't want to be a liar. The video, captured by an actual customer, Treasure McGraw, showed Wise leisurely swimming through the tank before eventually climbing out and making a mad and soaking wet dash out of the store to his car. McGraw stated she heard a big splash and thought it was one of the fish. My fiancé was like, "Somebody's in the tank," and we saw the guy swimming. After the incident, Bass Pro Shops filed a complaint with the Bossier City Police Department, explaining that they had to empty out the 13,000-gallon aquarium and clean it after Wise contaminated the water during his swim with the fishes. It cost them a large but yet undisclosed amount of money. Despite being obviously illegal, police only charged Wise with simple criminal damage to property and was quickly released with a citation to appear in court. Despite his newfound fame, Kevin does seem to have learned his lesson, as he told local news sources that he did plan on continuing to make videos for his followers, but was reluctant to do any more spur-of-the-moment pranks. Wise is not the first person to find themselves in a bit of legal trouble attempting to get their next TikTok high. A woman, attempting to make a funny video where her husband had it coming, soon found police knocking on her door when neighbors called the authorities, convinced something much more disturbing was going on. The reports given to local authorities in Chino, California, were of seeing a woman carrying a dead body from her house. The video originally depicted the would-be murderer mopping her floor while her careless husband walks over it. Later, it cuts to a scene of her dragging a lifeless dummy out the front door with a caption that reads, "I will miss him." Police came to the house but obviously could not find a body and therefore could not charge anyone with anything dastardly. With all the new and fun crimes to be committed in the name of viral videos, many of us may need to have a good lawyer on call. Hopefully, if you ever need a lawyer, yours will have some professionalism to spare, as our next group of Corona misfits seem to have forgotten what regular courtroom attire looks like. One Florida judge in Fort Lauderdale is taking a stand and wrote a letter to the Weston Bar Association, where he details the many outfit infractions he has witnessed on the now business-as-usual Zoom hearings he has presided over. He stated that one male lawyer appeared shirtless and another showed up to her Zoom hearing still in bed. He also stated that a beach cover-up won't hide that you're sitting poolside in a bathing suit. Judge Bailey also decried the lack of self-care he has noticed during the recent influx of Zoom hearings. Bailey said that some lawyers have had no concern for ill grooming, as most are still working from home amidst the ever-deepening pandemic. He is imploring lawyers to treat court hearings like court hearings, whether Zooming or not. Judge Bailey admits to still wearing his robe even during Zoom hearings and expects the same decorum from those he is presiding over. "I would want attorneys dressed, showing some respect for their recognition that this is a court hearing," he said. It's not just lawyers who are pushing the boundaries of Zoom fashion, however. Now Fishbowl, a workplace social network for verified employees, has recently done a survey to find out the real answers we all need. Who is actually wearing pants during their Zoom conference calls? Here's what they discovered. 1 out of 10 people wear only underwear below the belt during video conference calls. The gender breakdown probably won't surprise you. Men answered that they video conference in their underwear at more than 3 times a higher rate than women, at 14.27% versus 4.72%. Only 3% of professionals wear professional attire in video meetings. 75% answered with pajamas, sweats, shorts, or leggings. 12.5% answered with jeans. As a stay-at-home mom with 3 under 5, I live that pajama, sweat, shorts, leggings life. I get it. And makeup? Basically isn't happening. 53.97% of women answer that they have completely stopped wearing makeup. 22.2% of women say they no longer wear makeup as often. I made the mistake of putting lipstick on out of habit the other day when I took my daughter to a doctor appointment. It was terrifying when I took my mask off and thought my face was bleeding, because I apparently thought it was a red lipstick day. Lesson learned. Scientists in India have also learned their own powerful lesson about equipment safety and the monkey gangs who take advantage of their lax arrangements. In Lucknow, India, which is another case of the name really not doing the story any favors, a gaggle of monkeys attacked a medical official and stole blood samples of patients who had tested positive for coronavirus. The most terrifying part of this story to me is that the monkeys, who we know are smart animals, decided that the vials were worth taking in the first place. What was the plan? Do they have their own team of monkey scientists claiming to do a better job than what we're doing? Are they planning on letting us in on their findings? The attack occurred earlier this week when a lab tech was walking on the campus of a state-run medical college in Meerut, just outside of Lucknow. Dr. S.K. Garg, a top official at the college, lamented that monkeys grabbed and fled with the blood samples of 4 COVID-19 patients who are undergoing treatment. We had to take their blood samples again. In a now viral video, it shows one monkey thief in a tree with the stolen samples and subsequently gnawing on what looks to be surgical gloves. Local authorities and doctors are not quite sure what became of the vials, as they didn't know if the monkeys had spilled the samples. Locals were immediately concerned about further spread of the virus if the monkeys brought them into the more residential areas. Luckily, according to local officials, they were able to recover the sample boxes after the monkeys traveled up some nearby trees. Superintendent Dheeraj Raj said the samples were still intact and officials do not believe that there is increased risk of contamination or spread. Doctors have no idea if monkeys can contract the virus themselves. However, evidence suggests that humans can infect at least some animals with the virus. On April 5th, 5 tigers and 3 lions at the Bronx Zoo tested positive for COVID-19 and were found to have been infected by an asymptomatic staff person. Also, according to the Wildlife Conservation Society, at least 2 pet cats and a pet dog in the United States also tested positive, which they believe to also have been contracted through contact with people. Wild animals are becoming a real problem in many residential areas around the world. Animals are just roaming the streets in droves, reclaiming territory, as it were, as people stay indoors and under lockdown. India is already struggling with some near-apocalyptic type issues, even aside from their over 173,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 and about 5,000 deaths. It is also battling a devastating locust infestation and record 122-degree heat. As a lifetime Texas resident, that makes even me cringe. In the midst of all things terrible, I'm always drawn to looking for the bright spot. There's always one somewhere. Personally, in my own life, I've grown so much closer to my neighbors, who we never really even met before quarantine. Now we message throughout the week to see if we have anything the other needs. They drop leftovers at our house, and we leave fresh eggs from our chickens. The virus is scary, but kindness always finds a way to sneak in, no matter how bad the world gets. Sometimes, however, that kindness may look like Darth Vader riding on a small boat down a flooded river in the Philippines, handing out relief goods. I mean, that's a very strange vision of good, but it's still pretty good. The whole premise is strange. On May 4th, also known as Star Wars Day, a day that is apparently truly celebrated worldwide, local officials in the Philippines dressed up as Star Wars characters and wandered about to enforce their quarantine measures and simultaneously handed out relief packages. It's never quite explained why Star Wars, why Darth Vader. Perhaps it's simply the most universally recognizable costume they could think of. Their costumes are straight up a cosplay dream, with the Darth Vader and Stormtrooper outfits made from rubber mats and old plastic. They are intended to catch the attention of villagers outside of Manila and remind them to stay indoors as they continue to fight the spread of the virus throughout the country. The Philippines, whose capital and main cities have been under strict quarantine protocols, has recorded 9,485 confirmed coronavirus cases, 623 deaths, and 1,315 recoveries, government figures showed. This prompted their Star Wars display. We tell off residents who still go outdoors without the proper quarantine passes needed, and also those who do not wear face masks. We make sure the government guidelines are properly followed. Muriel Baldalgo, an elected official dressed in a stormtrooper costume, told Reuters, "Seems a bit rough around the edges to be sure, and maybe a bit scary, but according to Reuters, his getup is greeted with smiles and offers villagers a little distraction from the outbreak. Maybe some of our cities should look into hiring some out-of-work Disney employees, if they really want people to start taking the whole mask thing seriously. We all know there is nothing more magical than a Disney princess, and I feel like even the staunchest mask denier would have a hard time telling Cinderella that they just don't care. But maybe that's just me. I'm an unashamed and very vocal Disney junkie." So far, we've traveled all over the world and looked at some of the questionable, frightening, heartwarming, and sometimes silly effects the pandemic has had on our world. When we come back, we'll continue our journey and hang out with Florida Man, with a very uncommon mode of transportation, a 5-year-old with big dreams, a vegetarian who didn't let a gross situation go to waste, and a famous actor who takes his job maybe a little too seriously. If you hang out till the end of today's show, I'll be counting down the top 10 most insane sound illusions.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Hey, welcome back. From aquarium dips, monkey attacks, costumed government employees, and questionable work-from-home fashion, it's hard to believe we have anywhere to go from here. But we do. In Broward County, Florida man Michael Paul apparently needed a ride after being discharged from a local hospital. According to multiple reports, he decided his best option was not to call an Uber, but instead to actually steal an ambulance. Paul decided to take the empty yet running Broward Sheriff's Office fire rescue ambulance around 6:30 p.m. from the local Broward hospital. Deputies told local WFOR-TV that the ambulance had been left running, something rescue workers do regularly to ensure ambulances are cool and ready for patients who might need them, and apparently for those who may just need a ride. According to the Miami Herald, as emergency response team members wheeled a patient inside, Paul drove off with rescue vehicle number 102. Surprisingly, it wasn't the most well-thought-out plan, as the ambulance was equipped with GPS tracking device, and both Paul and the ambulance were found about 30 minutes later in Deerfield Beach. When questioned about his motives, the police report stated that Paul told detectives he stole a red ambulance because he needed a car. To be fair, I do respect a guy who tries to solve a problem instead of just wallowing in defeat. Paul was eventually apprehended and arrested. He was charged with grand theft auto, driving with a suspended or revoked license, and violating a learner's permit. Paul is actually not the first time I have personally heard of something like this happening. I have actually experienced this firsthand. I used to live downtown, and there was a little 7-Eleven across from my apartment that I would go to regularly. Once, I was walking inside after seeing a fire truck pull out of the parking lot. I didn't think much of it at the time, until I saw a fireman standing outside the 7-Eleven looking very confused. I then had to listen to this poor guy call his station to inform them that his truck had indeed been stolen. A woman, who was later found to be under the influence of methamphetamines, decided to just take it for a joyride. She didn't hurt anyone or destroy any property, thank goodness. They later found the truck in a field seemingly unharmed. Though I would be willing to bet that the fireman who lost the truck is probably still hearing that story today. If by some crazy chance you happen to be listening today, Fireman Joe, I've always called you Fireman Joe in my head, I've no clue why. I'm still talking about it too. Something else I'm still talking about? Anyone ever want something so bad when you were a kid and it just never happened? Like, this is absolutely a first world privilege type problem here, guys. I am well aware. With that being said, I always wanted a Barbie Power Wheels car. You know what I'm talking about, the car you could actually sit in and drive. My parents were like, nah. They assumed I was the type of kid who couldn't handle it and would be the reason they write the warnings on the instruction booklets. In their defense, they were probably right. And in the grand scheme of things, I'm probably alive today because they didn't get me one. But that's entirely beside the point. My dreams were my dreams. In Utah, a 5-year-old boy, Adrian Zamaripa, with much bigger dreams than myself, went viral when he took $3 out of his piggy bank, stole the keys to his parents' SUV, and went for a drive on the freeway, following the signs that pointed south to Los Angeles. His reasoning? He wanted to buy a Lamborghini, and his parents apparently selfishly wouldn't buy him one. Luckily, he only made it 3 miles from home and did not hurt himself or anyone else before he was pulled over by local authorities. His story did catch the attention of some individuals who were able to make his dream a reality. Whereas I have yet to ever set foot into a Barbie car, though by now a foot may be all I could fit into it at this point. The very next day, after his story went viral, after being pulled over by the Utah Highway Patrol, the boy received a visit from Jeremy Neves. Mr. Neves owns a matte black Lamborghini and decided to give the young would-be miscreant a ride in his V10 supercar. According to Fox 13 News Utah, Neves told local news, "I don't want to condone kids taking cars and getting in trouble or breaking the law, but the success principles that he displayed were magnificent to me. Apparently, the 5-year-old car enthusiast spends hours watching Lambo videos online, and his obsession is also being rewarded by a California company offering to fly him out to actually get behind the wheel of a real Lamborghini and drive it, in a controlled environment and with appropriate supervision, I can only assume. At this point, his family has hidden the car keys and put extra locks on the doors to prevent Adrian from attempting to find his own fortune again. The family faced a lot of backlash for the event, as it happened while the older sister who was watching her young brother had fallen asleep. I will tell you this. The other day, my 5-year-old asked me to go and read in her room. I told her she could, and it was maybe 20 minutes later when she calmly asked me to come into her bedroom, as she had something to show me. I went in, and she had devised a pulley system with an old Easter basket and a jump rope to lower herself out of her bunk bed. However, she's 5, so the pulley system had its flaws. Her hair got caught in one of the jump rope knots and pulled a chunk out. She has a bald spot now. 5-year-old's gonna 5-year-old. Let's focus on the fact that no one got hurt. Here's hoping you get your dream someday, Adrian. I'm still waiting on mine. Maybe this is my year. One thing I am very glad to never have received is what our next story details. British media personality Sam Darlaston purchased some broccoli shoots from his local Tesco. However, when he opened it, he found a caterpillar, who he eventually named Cedric. Even just saying that gives me the heebie-jeebies. But instead of losing his mind about it, as I inevitably would have done, a couple years ago we were putting up our Christmas tree, and my husband tried to avoid telling me about the spiders he found crawling around on it. Y'all, I found out, and we now have a beautiful fake tree, along with forever nightmares about Christmas spiders. Anyways, the Kiss FM UK host decided to raise this particular caterpillar as his own. He told HuffPost that he did his research initially and discovered the exact type of caterpillar butterfly they were dealing with, a cabbage white. He then decided to build him a little home in the lounge with all the broccoli he wanted. Tesco refunded his $1.37 for the broccoli. However, in a brilliant twist of fate, when he returned home with more broccoli, Sam was amazed to find 5 more caterpillars in his new produce, and his unfortunate roommate was forced to check his broccoli as well, and they came up with 1 more for a grand total of 7 in the Darlaston Caterpillar family band. He decided to keep them all, stating, "I'm a firm believer in not harming any animals or insects if possible, and I just sort of knew what I had to do after Googling how to keep a caterpillar." The remaining names were as follows: Brock, Ollie, Carlos, Croc, Janine, Slim, and Eric. Sam ran into some issues with raising a large family of caterpillars. One was their ability to escape. He told HuffPost, "One day we found one on an ornamental vanilla stick, one under a table, and one under a candle holder cocooning. They'd broke free from the paper lid. Eventually, all of his caterpillars entered the cocoon stage, and ultimately they all turned into butterflies. I felt a tiny bit sad watching them spread their wings, but overall, the feeling was happiness," Darlaston told HuffPost. "I'm just happy at least one of us gets to go out during these times." Now that last part hit me a bit hard, to be honest. This house is becoming smaller by the day over here. Now, I'm super honest about how all this inside time is affecting an extrovert like myself. Some of us, however, don't need the excuse of a pandemic to go all-out cuckoo banana boat. Feel free to check out last week's podcast for that neat reference. If you are a movie fanatic like myself, you have undoubtedly followed the ever-evolving career of the eccentric Shia LaBeouf. He's made some extremely questionable decisions throughout his career, but also made some amazing movies. I'm looking directly at you, Peanut Butter Falcon. If you haven't seen it, run Don't Walk to Your Prime account. But recently it came out that Shia LaBeouf got his chest and torso heavily tattooed for the new movie The Tax Collector. Like, really, really tattooed. Not drawn on, not a 25-cent water tattoo, a whole permanent chest piece for a role in a film. The director David Ayer praised LaBeouf in Newsweek, saying, "He's one of the best actors I've worked with, and he's the most committed to body and soul." He had a tooth pulled on Fury, and then on Tax Collector he got his whole chest tattooed. So he kind of goes all in, and I've never known anyone that committed. 2019 was an incredible year for Shia LaBeouf, as the actor starred in two of the most critically acclaimed roles of his career. He was in The Peanut Butter Falcon, which led his co-star Dakota Johnson to call him the greatest actor of my generation. He also starred in the deeply emotional film Honey Boy, which was a screenplay he wrote about his own life while in rehab. I have always admired LaBeouf's commitment to his roles, much like another of my favorite slightly off-kilter actors, Christian Bale. Bale has been reported to have the same sort of commitment to his roles in films. It was reported that he once lost 60 pounds very quickly to play an insomniac in The Machinist. He also bulked up and had major dental work done for The American Psycho, and also gained 40 pounds to play Dick Cheney in Vice. Is this style of method acting really necessary? I have no idea. But I do know that I wanted to be a film actress for most of my life, and I can't lose 10 pounds to fit better into my jeans, so there's something to be said for that level of commitment. We've continued on our weird journey today with some intense rides and harrowing situations. When we come back, we'll also discuss another nightmare that I have that turns out is apparently a real thing. Find a rare bug that showed up dressed in the most amazing color. We'll walk through a museum in Sweden that's mere existence begs the question, why? And learn about snot palaces. Because, why not?
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
We're back. In our previous segment, we heard from a couple car thieves, one with a dream of greatness and one who just wanted to get home, an animal adoption story from very questionable beginnings, and the kind of crazy that may seem extreme, but will get you in front of a camera and into the spotlight. Our next batch of insane stories vary from squeamish to may make you throw up a little bit, so consider this your trigger warning. There are not a lot of things that make me truly want to nope right out of a situation. I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a baby. I've seen some things. But one thing I can tell you that I would waste no time in turning right around from and potentially running in sheer self-preservation panic would be flying snakes. Recently, researchers at Virginia Tech University said they have figured out why a species of flying snake native to Asia wriggle their bodies when they glide through the air. You heard that right. Someone was actually researching why a particular snake flies. A snake. Wiggle on the ground led to the fall of humanity's snake. They were on purpose studying them. With that being said, apparently it is for stability, so that's comforting. The researchers who published their findings Monday in the journal Nature Physics said they conducted indoor experiments with the paradise tree snake. They developed a computer model to determine why the snakes wobble as they glide through the air. Scientists were already aware of why snakes moved the way they do on the ground, but why they slithered through the air as well was a question. In fact, the paradise tree snake, which is the only known limbless vertebrate capable of flight, undulate in both horizontal and vertical waves while gliding through the air. In case you were wondering, this is real life and not actually a nightmare. Isaac Yeaton, the lead author of this study, said the researchers determined the snakes slither midair to stabilize their bodies. It's hard to believe a snake can do this, Mr. Yeaton said. It's kind of scary, but there's a lot of intricate things that are going on. He said the motion also appears to help the reptiles cover more distance. Their flights generally last only a couple of seconds at a speed of around 25 miles per hour, and they land without injury. So, obviously, they can get to me faster. Yeaton said the researchers are next aiming to observe the snakes gliding in outdoor environments to help the team determine how the animals generate lift and turn while gliding. Once a team of researchers in Singapore witnessed a snake jump from 30 feet up and travel over 60 feet in the air on a windless day. The sheer terribleness of that last statement can't be properly conveyed, and it's making me question my own decisions on the whole entire segment, actually. With that being said, our next story is slightly less terror-inducing. Photographer Calvin Lee has recently captured incredible pictures of a rare pink grasshopper spotted in the wild in the UK. Young female meadow grasshoppers can be a pink or purple-red shade before they develop the characteristic green coloring we know them for. While the meadow grasshopper itself isn't a rare species, vivid pink female nymphs like this one are only seen very occasionally. I was absolutely giddy at finding this story. A while back, I remember reading a story about a woman who became so obsessed with pink, it literally consumed her life. That woman was me. I am her. I mean, not literally, but it was a pretty fair comparison. I really, really like pink. I oftentimes have to force myself to buy other colors. It's rough. The thought of a pink grasshopper really brought my heart joy. I didn't even cringe at the idea of a bug, which is a whole miracle in and of itself. I'll post a photo on the Weird News Podcast Instagram and Twitter after the show today. Take a look and find your joy. Lee first captured a photo of the rare insect about 5 years ago, and then made it his mission to find another. So he headed back to Messingham Quarry in Scunthorpe, Lincolnshire, the same area where he spotted the first one, and couldn't believe his luck when he found another. He then snapped 3 photos which show the buggy darling peering over the plant to look right in the camera like the star she is. Apparently, pink grasshoppers are so rare in the wild because they are so bright and easily spotted by predators. This explains the rarity, but also brings down the room a bit. It's not just professional photographers who have spotted the elusive bug recently. Elsewhere in the UK, a young amateur entomologist recently discovered a pink grasshopper in his garden. James Bell, a 7-year-old bug sleuth, loves nothing more than looking for insects and other creepy crawlies in his garden. While bug hunting on June 22nd, he was thrilled to find a bright pink grasshopper in the undergrowth. And to his surprise, when he returned to the same spot later that day, a second one had arrived. Grasshoppers are typically brown or green or a combination of the two. The ones that turn pink do so because of a genetic mutation called erythrism, which causes some pigments in the bug's body to be overproduced. It is caused by a recessive gene that affects grasshoppers in a similar way to albino animals. Pink grasshoppers have been spotted around the UK a few times within the last decade, but few have ever seen more than one. As fun as the whole pink bug thing is, I do feel for his mom. James's mom, Katie Bell, said she has been kept very busy during lockdown, building 3 bug hotels to encourage wildlife into their garden and catching hundreds of insects that now live in bug houses throughout their home. James is fascinated by bugs. He is not as fond of the things he has to do for school, but he absolutely loves bugs, she said. I think my son and James would be fast friends. She also told local media that James had to write down 3 wishes he had in lockdown for some schoolwork, and his first wish was to find a bug that's never been found before. So, I think this is pretty close. I agree, and now I have a brand new addition to my bucket list. One thing that is not on my bucket list, and despite making it on the show, still won't ever be on there, is to smell rotting shark, which apparently, recently, could be found in Sweden's most Y museum, Sweden's Disgusting Food Museum. According to Reuters, the dead mouse in the Chinese wine sure looks nasty, and the maggots in the cheese tend to put people off. But nothing is more horrible to an unaccustomed palate than the Icelandic fermented shark. It's the worst. Or, so says the expert, it tastes like chewing on a urine-infested mattress, said Samuel West, who, as curator of the Disgusting Food Museum, knows a thing or two about unpleasant victuals. My question is, though, how? How would you know? I mean, I know that our taste and smell are connected, but that seems like a pretty specific comparison. It's a fermented, sort of rotten Icelandic shark, he says. Anthony Bourdain, the late TV personality, called it the single most disgusting thing he'd ever eaten. From spicy rabbit heads to fruit bat soup, the collection, which is on display in the Swedish city of Malmö, challenges perceptions of taste, generally opens visitors' minds to other cultures. I mean, just because I don't have the desire to eat fermented anything really, other than grapes, other cultures' delicacies might be surprising. When asked if anyone had ever thrown up at the exhibit, West admitted that it had happened twice at the time of the interview, which is why their tickets were not printed on paper, but instead, those who pay for entrance to the museum are given vomit bags. Just in case. Reuters confirmed the display includes grasshoppers, cooked animal skulls, and other body parts, including an eyeball, in pots or on boards. European fare ranges from Iceland's cured shark to Sardinia's casu marzu cheese, which is riddled with insect larvae. There is Scottish haggis made from sheep innards, and Sweden's smelly surströmming fermented herring. The Asian fare seems a bit more palatable to me, as it includes durian fruit and stinky tofu. I can handle tofu. Turns out Peru roasts guinea pigs, which, honestly, I probably could have lived without that information. North America is represented by sweet treats, Jell-O salad, and root beer, which I don't know if that means we're boring or something else entirely, but I do really love root beer. I'm iffy on the Jell-O salad, but I'll take it all day instead of rotting shark, if anyone's asking. And as long as we're talking about really gross things, let's head to the bottom of the ocean. True confessions, I have always been terrified of the ocean. I like to go to the beach. I like to look at it. I'll even get in just enough to enjoy the waves. But that is where it ends. The ocean is terrifying, guys. We literally do not know how far it goes down. And there are creatures we haven't discovered in the deep, hellish abyss. Recently, scientists have made some pretty important discoveries as far as giant, creepy sea creatures go. Underwater laser scans have revealed new details of how a sea creature called giant larvaceans feed themselves by flapping a flimsy tail inside a cloud of snot. Literally. A mucus house, or as one bioengineer named Kakani Katija has taken to calling them, snot palaces. It's not easy to study such a delicate creature. That's why Katija and her colleagues have been working on a robotic laser imaging system called Deep PIV. It detects how water flows inside the mucus clouds and lets researchers figure out the palace's inner 3D structure. The new information they have been able to record suggests that the inner ducts, chambers, and valves, all made of mucus, help harvest bacteria and other suitable food particles from regular seawater. According to ScienceNews.org, when they build their homes, larvaceans remind Katija a bit of spiders. But larvaceans and spiders are among the few animals that don't collect building material or dig and sculpt soil. Instead, they secrete all their architecture. Scientists believe that larvaceans make and remake their mucus homes each day. According to reports, a millimeter-sized gob of mucus beads up on a larvacean's head. Then the blob can inflate into a finished house in 45 minutes. I will say I'm a bit jealous of the prospect of not having to clean. If I could just create a new home each day instead of lamenting over the state of my current one, I feel like my stress level would be deservedly reduced. Scientists have had many theories about what the true purpose of the flimsy snot palace might be. They now believe that the outer house might protect the larvacean inside it from stinging animals that waft through the open water. That engulfing mucus might also work as a sort of invisibility cloak. So, in turn, we've determined that the giant larvacean would be sorted into House Gryffindor. Because obviously. It works in that the larvacean sends seawater surging through the channels in the inner house. Since the creature lives in the Twilight Zone, however, water motions can tip off a hungry fish to the possibility of a nearby larvacean lunch. Yet, by the time that expelled water finds its way past the outer mucus house, the motion has slowed by 3 orders of magnitude. A predator might not bother to investigate. Here again, gone again. The world really is a strange and beautiful place. It's gross and scary and generally unpredictable. Thanks for sticking around as we muddled our way through some of the most recent insanity that the universe has brought to our door. And when we return, I'm going to count down the top 10 most insane audible illusions.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back, guys. I don't know if any of you out there share the same random childhood memories, but I think a lot of us tend to share certain things, like learning the recorder in music class, line dancing in PE, and pizza day in the cafeteria. For some reason, I also have a super distinct memory of finding my first optical illusion book in the school library. You know those books where you had to stare at them for 30 seconds or so and then suddenly an image would appear? To be fair, I'm not really sure if that's even considered an optical illusion or something else entirely, but the point is you can't always trust what you see, right? Same goes for what you hear. That's a whole other podcast, though. Listverse.com dropped a pretty amazing list of some pretty ridiculous audible illusions. Most of these should be listened to through some sort of stereo speakers to hear them appropriately. I'll also drop the list on Instagram and Twitter if you want to listen and download the sounds yourself. So let's get started. Number 10, the scale illusion. This illusion was discovered by Deanna Deutsch and shows how our brains group similar notes together. However, different people will hear the scales in different ways. In this illusion, 2 major scales are played, one ascending and one descending. There are several ways in which people perceive these sounds, but the most common is to group the high and low notes together. Rather than hearing the 2 scales, people hear a descending and reascending melody in one ear, and an ascending and descending melody in the other. In other words, the brain reassigns some of the notes to a different ear in order to make a coherent melody. Right-handed people tend to hear the high melody in the right ear and the low one in the left, while left-handers show a more diverse response. Number 9. Phantom melodies. Some pieces of music consist of high-speed arpeggios or other repeating patterns, which change only subtly. If they're played fast enough, the brain picks up on the occasional notes that change and links them together to form a melody. The melody disappears if the piece is played slowly. Compare these recordings of Christian Sinding's Rustle of Spring. At the higher speed, the changing notes linger in your perception long enough to be linked into a melody, but at the lower speeds, they're too widely separated. Number 8. Shepard's Ascending Tones. This is a recording of Shepard's paradox synthesized by Jean-Claude Rosette. Pairs of chords sound as if they are advancing up the scale, but in fact, the starting pair of chords is the same as the finishing pair. If you loop this sample seamlessly, then it should be impossible to tell where the sample begins and ends. Number 7. Falling Bells. This is a recording of a paradox where bells sound as if they are falling through space. As they fall, their pitch seems to be getting lower, but in fact, the pitch gets higher. If you loop this sample, you will clearly hear the pitch jump back down when the sample repeats. This reveals that the start pitch is obviously much lower than the finishing pitch. Number 6. Quickening Beat. This recording is subtle. A drum beat sounds as if it is quickening in tempo, but the starting tempo is the same as this finishing tempo. Listen carefully. Number 5. Virtual Barbershop. This is a demonstration of the stereo effect. Listening to it, you feel as though you are in a barber's chair, with the barber moving around you, clipping away at your hair. As the barber moves to your right, the volume increases slightly in the right channel and decreases in the left. Similarly, increases in the volume of sound from the clippers give the impression that he is bringing them closer and closer to each ear. The illusion demonstrates our ability to locate sounds in space by comparing the inputs to the two ears. We can work out where a sound is coming from.
Now, as I begin the clipping, and I bring the clippers closer to your ear, very close to the right ear. Follow me as I move around the back of the head.
Number 4. Matchbox Rattle. This, like the barbershop sound, is another stereo illusion. In this illusion, a man shakes a matchbox all around your body and lights matches occasionally. Number 3. Tritone Paradox. In this recording, some people hear the two notes going from low to high, while others hear them going from high to low. This is a good one to listen to in a group, so you can compare notes afterwards. The notes being played are called the tritone. It falls exactly in the middle of a standard musical scale. This note was once considered to be evil and was not used in music until modern times. Number 2. Sound for under 20s only. Now I'm going to admit, I honestly can't hear this sound. I have no idea if it really exists, but I'm putting it on here anyway. This is a sound that can apparently only be heard by people under 20. Some over 20 can hear it, but not many. It is a sine wave at 18,000 hertz. By comparison, a dog whistle sounds at 16,000 to 22,000 hertz, meaning your dog can hear this under 20 sound as well. This sound is used by some teenagers as a ringtone on their mobile phone, so that only they and others of their age group can tell when the phone is ringing. It is also occasionally used in England to play very loud in areas that authorities don't want teens to congregate in, as the noise annoys them. As people get older, they lose the ability to hear higher-pitched sounds. That is the reason that only young people can hear this sound. It is too high for most people over the age of 20. So, at 35, I'm guessing my ears just don't work like they used to. Number 1. Phantom words. This illusion was first demonstrated at the University of California, San Diego. This recording features overlapping sequences of repeating words or phrases located in different regions of stereo space. As you listen to it, you'll start to pick out specific phrases. However, none of the phrases are really there. Your brain is constructing them in a bid to make sense of a meaningless noise. Indeed, you may find that the phrases you hear are related to what's on your mind. For example, people who are dieting often hear phrases associated with food. This can be a very eerie experience. Now that your mind has sufficiently been twisted, head on over to listverse.com to listen and download the sounds yourself. It's time to close out the show. Thanks for sticking around and combing through today's weirdest news. And as always, thank you for listening to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night. Be good to each other.